Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to another episode of what are we dubbed? I don't even know the number now. Welcome to another episode of PMI Shorts. Today, Jan and I are joined by Katie Lawrence. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Terribly excited to have Katie join us. And if you paid attention or saw some of the other videos, you saw us talk with Dave Giachello about time management, and that's going to turn into a series. And we're going to do the very same thing with Katie. And Katie is our resident expert on motivation. And so we're going to kick off today talking about motivation. What is motivation? What does it really mean? And we're also going to anticipate doing several more of these, breaking motivation down into some critical steps. So, Katie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we can start off with the big question. What is motivation?
So motivation is getting people or yourself to do something, right? It's why people do what they do. Why do they make the choices they make? Why do they say what they say? Why do they act the way they act? And it can be in little snippets. We can look at why someone is motivated to do one little action, or what is their long-term goal and why are they motivated to stay with that long-term goal. So it's time relative, and we can look at it in all sorts of different time fragments.
Interesting. I have all these old memories of old bosses years ago. Their motivation was just a swift kick in the pants.
Yeah, we call that extrinsic motivation.
And it's usually not real effective.
It did have its place, and it did work quite effectively for a short period of time.
That's what I was about to say. It's very effective. So fear, punishment, even sometimes monetary rewards are very effective in the short term. A lot of times we see that when people are extrinsically motivated by something, it's short-term related. They want to get something done quickly. They want to, do well on a go live of a project, or they want to avoid the wrath of a boss, right? Whatever it is, it's a short term. Someone who's carrying something for the long term is going to be more likely to be intrinsically motivated, something about themselves they're bringing and finding value in over the course of time.
Well, Jan alluded to it a minute ago, I guess during, just planning and talking about this, we live in a different world than we did 5 years ago on many different levels. And part of that is certainly COVID. Part of that is an incredible shift from being together in an office to being together in more of a digital space like we are here. And I'm going to assume that a lot of motivational techniques have changed somewhat, but I'm going to also assume that at the core of that, things really don't change.
Yeah. And so the core is that, the research shows kind of time and again, is high performers and high performing teams tend to be motivated by seeing progress on a meaningful goal. So that's 3 parts, right? It's progress, something that's meaningful, and a goal. So there has to be something you're working towards, but it has to mean something. And so in order to show progress and in order to keep wanting to go, you have to show progress. And so that's harder in the digital space because you are less likely to be interacting with humans face to face. So you're less likely to see the impact. You're less likely to find that meaning. And so leaders really have to be very intentional to connect people's individual jobs and roles to the bigger work that's being done by the organization or the team. And then being really willing to show that progress too. So I think about those thermometers for like a capital campaign where you're trying to, raise the bar, right? Up. The more we can show our teams that kind of progress, whatever it is, with data, with metrics, with opportunities to share how things are going, tends to keep people much more motivated and translates better in the digital space.
Very good. Jan, how do you correlate this to some of the experiences that you've got?
So I think, David, just to go along with what Katie has said, it's just really finding out what's important to that individual. And then how do you bring what's important to that individual together as a team for a common goal? And I think that can be tricky sometimes, but it's important because if you even have one team member that doesn't find motivation, it can bring the whole team down. So I think it's a two-step process is you have to find out what's important to each individual and then take all those individual acts of motivation and bring them together.
Katie, I peeked into the webinar that you did for certified professionals a couple of weeks ago, and there's a tremendous amount of science behind all of this. I mean,
there is.
This is not like the latest trend or what's working today. This is stuff that's not just decades old, it's eons old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot of neuroscience behind the work of motivation. The interesting thing about motivation and the way our brains are wired is what can be really motivational in one place can be really threatening if it's missing. So it can almost feel very unsafe if you don't feel the motivational side of it. I think about a model that was developed by a neuropsychologist named David Rock, and he has a model through the Neuroscience Institute called the SCARF model. And so there are 5 components, and it spells the word SCARF. So you want to hit each of those components in order to feel like you are motivated in each of those ways. And I am totally, I'm stalling because I'm drawing a blank on the very first one. So I'll come back to it in a second. So the C is certainty, the A is autonomy, the R is relationships, and the F is fairness. And at some point, the S will come back to me. But the challenge is that is what feels certain to me may suddenly disappear in a digital space, right? Like I don't see the people that I'm around. I don't know that I can predict this. What's going to happen, or maybe I don't have a boss who's very predictable, or I don't have an organization that feels very predictable. So that feels threatening. But on the flip side of that, so if we think about certainty and we think about the way that a manager or a leader can provide that as much certainty as they can, now that person can feel safe and they can feel that much more motivated as they're moving towards goals. People love to have that information that ties things together. So that's one of those pieces.
Right. I think just because of the world that we live in today, and I know there's a lot of our customer base that remained at the office throughout the pandemic. And, a lot of this is like foreign. They're like, what are you talking about? But I was really surprised in a recent survey that we did. I was expecting a different answer. And the answer that came back was about 50%, a little over 50% of the people that responded to it were in a hybrid situation. They were in the office a little bit, they were at the house for a little bit, or in some kind of different workspace. So I think most people have certainly come in contact with this. And I would think that the managers and the leaders of organizations today have got to find not just value in what we're talking about, but probably some tips and tricks of their own that they could share with us.
Sure.
That's what I need to do. I need to tell people, put those in the comments down below.
Right.
I don't think we've had an opportunity yet to do that, Jan. We need to start asking people, hey, tell us what you're doing and what works in your organization.
Yeah. Because I think that's really important. Like what Jan said earlier, is what works for your team may be slightly different than what works for my team, or what I have found. I can tell you big trends. I can tell you what the industry finds. I can tell you what neuroscience tells us. And I'm always going to tailor it to the team I'm working with today, right? So the same thing is going to be for any of our leaders. You're going to take the big amount of information and you're going to tailor it right to it's almost like raising kids. There's general pediatric advice, and then there's what works for my kid in that relationship, right?
Right. That's crazy. Jan knows this, but I've been down the rabbit hole recently on photography, and the people that I tend to follow are the ones that basically start out and go, hey, this is how I do it. It works for me. Take what works for you. Happy to share. And if it doesn't work for you, pay attention to somebody else, but leave some comments. That's what we need to do, Jan. We got to start asking for comments. Oh my
Yeah, I
gosh.
think that's would be very helpful. So
That would be a winner. Well, let me tell you this, Katie. I certainly enjoyed just kind of visiting today and kind of opening this can of worms, if you will. What I'd like to do is just to let people know, hey, pay attention, because over the next several weeks, we're going to dive into motivational topics and slice it and dice it just about every way that we can think of. I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Me too.
Fantastic. Well, this was a great beginning. You
Thanks
all
so
have
much.
a wonderful day. Okay. Bye-bye.
thanks, everyone.